spotless and true, the match of you. You sent him in to bear our sin, the whips and scorn, the curtain torn. How did it feel to let him go, to face the death that we all know? Yet all you said, lest faith grow dim, this is my son, listen.
Well, something was breaking up and actually chattering into the phone.
We don't deserve.
Let's try again.
All right. Well, where was I when that noise started? I said we're talking about a right to liberty, okay, a right to travel, okay, the right to life, to earn a living, the right to the pursuit of happiness. Now, in the law dictionaries of old, pursuit of happiness is the right to acquire property and make yourself comfortable in life. All of those are tenets of the Declaration of Independence, and they are gone in terms of most people's, but most people didn't know what those meant and didn't know the Declaration was law. Now, the really big trick about showing that's law is to look at the Alaska Statehood Act. You can look up the Statehood Act and just, Google will get it for you. And the Constitution of the state is covered there. It says the Constitution of the State of Alaska shall always be Republican in form and shall not be repugnant to the Constitution of the United States and the principles of the Declaration of Independence. You see, the Declaration of Independence is law. And that's an important feature, okay? And all states are entered into the federal union in the same way. No matter where you are, the new state has to meet these conditions in order to become a state in the United States of America. So you have these really basic ideas there. We're getting a little chop again in the signal. But anyway, so the important thing about this is that where certain principles are being ignored. Those things were brought forward into the Constitution for the United States of America. Article 1, Section 9 forbids any state to grant titles of nobility, pass any bill of attainder, or grant any letters of marque and reprisal. And Article 1, Section 10 forbids the federal government from doing likewise. Now, most people don't know what a title of nobility means, but it's important to understand that means they have a separate law, and they're not bound to the law of the everyday citizen. A good example would be, I think it was in the movie Braveheart, I may be wrong about that, but there was this nobleman who wanted his right of prima noctu. He was going to sleep with this lady who had just been married to another man, and if she didn't do it, the sheriff would come and put her in stocks and beat her publicly, lock her in the Tower of London, or whatever the nobleman said to do. It's in the movie, I believe it was Braveheart. And you get the idea that basically she's a victim of forcible rape, and it's enforced by the sheriff. Well, the idea was that he could commit a crime with impunity, and that was a title of nobility. And when we look back at things like the income tax issue, would that be criminal if you did it? Well, yes, it would. Would it be criminal for you to force people out of their homes by armed force? And all the noise. Are we there?
Hey, Jim, sorry about that. That was us. So, continue.
There's a lot more noise.
What was that? Are you still getting noise?
Well, yeah, this is screeching and squawking in the phone there.
Okay, let me. Is it happening right now?
No.
Okay.
Whatever it is stop.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, that's a little broken.
I was trying to mute myself on this little mic part, but
it's probably not you, John. Ordinarily, we'll have the ability to mute everyone out. Tonight, we're not able to do that just because we can't. We're just, like I said, we're having first-timer challenges, so just if you can just continue, and we will keep that to a minimum.
The other thing was I brought up was the car thing, that if you were to go down the road pulling people over and demanding they buy your permission to travel on the public highway, that would also be a crime. Now, our government is actually committing these crimes at all levels. And the thing of it is, all rights, as we just reviewed, are derived from the people, and the people have no such right, and you cannot grant a right, not even to a legislative representative. And that's what a republic is. You have this representative representing you, and he goes to Congress only with the powers that the people themselves actually have. If you don't have a particular right, you cannot grant that right to the government. But one of the examples of people where people do have a particular right, for example, the right to explore and discover minerals such as oil. Well, Alaska can go out and explore and discover minerals and claim oil properties. Okay, that's an ordinary right. You have that right, and you can grant that to the state. Not as a matter of exclusive monopoly, but we do have privately held oil, and we have publicly held oil by our state, and that's perfectly legal to do. There's nothing unconstitutional about it. But the trick is that we have this idea that we're, and no one knows that these titles of nobility are forbidden, because they didn't know the effect of a title of nobility, giving someone the right to break what otherwise is a law for the rest of us. And that's forbidden. Article 1, Section 9, American Constitution. That was brought forward into the Statehood Act and forward into the Alaskan Constitution. Alaska Constitution, Article 1, Section 2, all powers are inherent in the people, all powers of the state. So you have that in a complete sense. And the idea is to make some sense constitutionally. It isn't that I say so. The Alaska Statehood Act says so. The Declaration of Independence says so. The Constitution says so, and specifically where it says that. The Law Dictionary says, okay, there's a number of things that we can discuss like that. You don't have to grant an opinion. We can just take what's already written down in fairly clear and in fairly concise everyday language. And these are the important issues. When you see these things violated in this way, and then most people can understand the concern that others now have. And of course, you'll ask the question, where did all of this law come from? And what was the first important publication of law, or at least proposal, that would have actually promoted this sort of thing? And there was a famous book published in 1848, and it recommends that the Chapter 2 of this title, the abolition of all property in land and application of rents of land to public purposes, such as a property tax, a heavy and progressive graduated income tax, the abolition of all rights of inheritance, confiscation of the property of all immigrants and rebels, centralization of credit in the hands of the state by a national bank with state capital and exclusive monopoly. Okay, centralization of the means of communication and transportation in the hands of the state. Extension, we go on and on and on about it. Free education for children in public schools. Okay, these are all on a list of 10. And the famous book is the Communist Manifesto, published in 1848, authored by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. And our government is more and more resembling these policies, approximately. Maybe not exactly. For example, we have centralization of credit in the hands of a large chartered corporation. But this becomes the de facto government. The old famous quote from the Rothschild people, give me control of the nation's money and I care not who makes its laws. So we're looking at these kinds of... Yes?
I was going to interrupt for just 1 second and ask if you could explain the difference between de jure and de facto government, please.
Oh, de jure, by law, de facto. Effectively, this is how it really works. Okay? Is that understood enough that everybody would get it?
I think so.
De facto is, as a matter of fact, as it's written. And I'm giving you, as a matter of fact, what's written and showing you that what's being done is a violation of what is written. So we have a de facto law coming from, as a matter of fact, it's more like the Communist Party. But in fact, it is actually written to disallow these kinds of things. Make sense?
It does.
How we think? Hello?
Can you hear me, Jim? Thank you. Yeah, please continue.
Now I hear you. Yeah, are we okay here? Did anybody hear what I said?
I think we got you, Jim.
Yeah, we can hear you just fine. Thank you.
Okay, good. I was just wondering how we were there. But I think, does that sum it up? Are we clear enough on this? That this is basically, the country is being victimized on a huge scale by criminals.
Oh, yeah, we
Can
noticed.
you go back? Can you discuss a little bit more? We talked earlier about 1913 and what happened there. Would you give us
1913, the famous year where the 16th Amendment to the Constitution was passed. And in 1913, we had the passage of the Federal Reserve Act, which was really something. It was December 23. Most of Congress, the Senate, had gone home for the Christmas holidays. A few remained behind, declared they had a quorum, formally ratified in their Reserve. In 1914, it began issuing Federal Reserve currency. Quite a story. There's a famous author wrote The Creature from Jekyll Island. Edward Griffin, I think, was his name, but I could be wrong. But this was a history of the Federal Reserve. It's a good read. I don't get any money from the man, G. Edward Griffin, I think was his name. I could be wrong. But it's amazing what the man told. It reads like a spy novel, and in fact, it's the truth. It's the history of the formation of the Federal Reserve. Good book. And like I said, I don't get any royalties for recommending it. I'm just telling you that that's a good read. It's a lot of fun. But as you get into the matter, this is for people who are new and who have never been told what a title of nobility entails. A bill of attainder includes bills of pains and penalties, see Black's Law Dictionary, 6th edition and earlier. A bill of attainder is the right to execute someone upon allegation without trial. A bill of pains and penalties, whenever the price of your crime is less than your life, is the ability to take property or demand immediate jail sentence without trial. And anybody who has lost property without trial deeming you should lose it, or anybody who has lost his freedom, he's in jail, imprisoned, without trial, is also the victim of an obvious. It requires that you have pass some bill of attainder or bill of pains and penalty into law. And no such bills can be passed into law. They're unconstitutional again. Article 1, Section 9 for the states, Article 1, Section 10 for the federal government of the United States of America. And so you look at these things that are going on in this country, the summarily taking people's cars, their houses, seizing their bank accounts, they're putting them into jails, or even having agents show up and somehow in the confusion shooting the intended victim. But it was all an accident. It's in the hubris and confusion. No, unforgivable, really. We're looking at the thing as a phenomenon in the country. It's be brought under control. We need to be typing and scratching again.
If everybody, because we can't control the board tonight, if everybody would hit *6 and mute themselves out, we won't have that kind of interruption either now or in the recording. So just hit *6 to mute yourself out. And I think you can probably go ahead, Jim.
Well, I didn't have much more that I wanted to elaborate on. I think that's actually quite a bit. If people would like to take it up, go to a Declaration of Independence, your Constitution, the Alaska Statehood Act, the Alaskan Constitution. See from the Declaration, the Constitution, the Statehood Acts, and the rest, what your laws really say. And understand if there are any words you don't understand, get a law dictionary, especially an older one, like an older Black's. I'd say 6th edition or earlier. 5th is even better. Or an old, Bouvier's was actually the only law dictionary ever declared to be the official law dictionary of the United States Congress. And those are still being reprinted as collectors want them. And they're very good. But I think really, it's just really what I wanted to do is to keep this simple and to take a look at the constitutionality of these things and how they violate the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the idea of the distinction between a republic and a democracy. A direct legislative democracy, one man, one vote, and whatever passes, no matter how insane, becomes law. That would qualify someone as being in rebellion, and when you register to vote, so you can vote on property tax referenda. It very well could be that you're covered by the Trading with the Enemy Act because you've declared yourself in rebellion. You had to be registered. When I was a young man, there were 2 ballots at a polling place. One was an elector's ballot, and it had only candidates on it. And another one was a ballot which involved property taxes and other public referenda. Participation in that would then, you implicitly pledge your own property as collateral for public debt, and you end up paying the public debt, borrowed money against your house. You permitted this implicitly by registering to vote. That's what was done. I used to know people that in northern Idaho that did not register to vote, and they always got electors' ballots at the polls. And I've known about this since I was in grade school. But no one knows this stuff anymore. Nobody's taught about it. And that's
what was your civics classes like?
How's that?
Did you have any civics classes in your school growing up?
When I went to high school, we had the usual American government, American history classes. And by then, they were horrible. There was actually a lot of the things I learned was in the 7th grade. We had an absolutely marvelous teacher. His fellow was named, I won't even put his name out there. Probably dead and gone by now anyway, but this Baptist minister taught all of the humanities in a block class. And I had my humanities section in the first hours of the class. This man was a fabulous speaker and taught so well. Of course, after he was there for 2 years, they wouldn't grant him a 3rd year because that would give him tenure. They fired him. He was one of the best teachers I ever had in my life. And like I said, it isn't what he says. He's telling me where to put my hands on the document. And that's what I'm doing right now. It isn't Jim says. It isn't Chris says. It isn't Maria says. This is the book. Read it. And where to find it. And that's the kind of power that I want in your hand. Show me something different. Show me that you have any right to do other than what you said you'd do.
How do you think we can change the education of the people that are following statutes versus laws? And maybe you could give a quick definition to new people on what a statute is versus a law or legality.
Okay. Whenever you see the word legal, you think in terms of contract. Okay. For example, an older Federal Reserve note prior to 1963 issue, it would say, this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private, and is redeemable in lawful money at any of the United States Treasury or any Federal Reserve Bank. All right, so it was legal tender, but not lawful money. Lawful money was silver and gold, something inherently valuable. Some of the founding fathers used to call gold portable land, because it's so completely married to the earth and how much there is and how quickly it can be produced and brought to market. It's an amazing commodity. It has many great properties. But it's been valuable throughout the ages. And you look at that, and that's lawful money, something that is inherently valuable. When you get a Federal Reserve note, that's legally money. We circulate it. We have laws and statutes that allow this. But in fact, to force someone to take a promise on a piece of paper, that promise is contractual. And when you get into the law of contract, you're talking legal. You're talking about inherent rights. You're talking lawful. Does that clarify anything? I hope it does.
I think it did pretty good. So what is it people give up whenever they choose to participate to vote?
They implicitly want to be the kind of person who says, gee, lady, that's a nice house you got there. You just pay us a few $1,000s a year and we'll let you live in your house. And since they want to commit that act of extortion, this is under threat of armed force among each other, and it offends the idea that you had a right to the pursuit of happiness, the right in the dictionary is the right to acquire property, make yourself comfortable in life. Okay? So when you talk about having that natural right, that God-given right, they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay? And that pursuit of happiness has to do with making yourself comfortable in life. You may want a cave, now you want some furniture and heat. Oh my God. Yes, you do. Well, as it goes, you see, what you have to understand is the right to that property is respected when everyone has those same rights. And it isn't something that you continuously have to pay for in order to buy someone's permission to have them. Those aren't rights. Those are paid privileges. Okay, what we look at in terms of those rights is the right that you have a right to stay alive. You have a right to travel about, gather up the things you need. You have a right to a home. You are a physical being. In a physical world, you need a place to be. It's a natural consequence of those facts, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely, because they go hand in hand. You can't get somewhere and get what you need without traveling.
That's right. And of course, we talk about, well, how do you do this or how do you do that and create, order? And the common law had that. What you did was you handed it all to a judge. It's like there were stop signs on the streets when the first automobiles came out. Okay, if you ran the stop sign and bashed Mrs. Jones' fender, I'm sorry, the stop sign will be used to adjudicate the accident against you in favor of Mrs. Jones, and you're going to owe her a fender and usual paint and whatever else. Okay, the thing of it is, the police didn't have any power to say, oh, goody, goody, and run out there. You ran the stop sign, we win $100 or whatever it is. There was none of that in there. And add that bill to your already sorry circumstances. And that's the attitude, is that to already take what is a mess and make it worse for both the victim and the the perpetrator impairs the ability of some people, at least, to make things right. Makes it even less likely. But a judge could easily do that, or even order somebody be removed from the road. If your cart's in really bad shape and the brakes failed and the thing went rolling down a hill and into somebody's, and this could even be something was drawn by horses or oxen, into somebody else's property, you were still liable for the damages.
Can you describe the difference between insurance and assurance?
Well, this insurance is actually a contract. We'll pay up to so much. You usually do this, and insurance is yes, you're making a promise. You're assuring someone that everything is going to be all right. But I think the contract, the insurance contract, has a value. That's a legal right. It's a right of contract. And you're not to, that's another constitutional provision. You're not to impair the right of a contract or the obligation of a contract. Unless, of course, it's a contract to do something nefarious that no one has a right to do. But despite all assurances and reassurances and all of the rest, I think insurance is a better thought in terms of, but that's, you're getting into the legal system, and which is not a bad place to be, as long as the legal system respects the natural rights of a living human being.
You were discussing prepayment using fuel taxes earlier as an example.
Okay, yeah, okay. Let's the attack on the motorist. You're out there. You have in the fuel tax. These are usually earmarked for the construction and maintenance of our highways, and there are also other transportation taxes that are far beyond just fuel tax imposed on large commercial users of the highways. Thousands and thousands of dollars just for tractor-trailer rigs and things like that, plus the fact that they burn large amounts of fuel, moving, 40,000, 80,000 in freight, plus the rate, the movement of all that iron that made the truck for much. Well, when somebody buys the motor fuel, the car won't go unless you buy the motor fuel that makes it go. Well, once you have a tank full of fuel, you paid the demanded price for the construction and the maintenance of the highway. There's a debt now. You're owed the use thereof. You paid for it, or your share of it at least. And we look at that obvious, debt that the state owes you this. They have accepted your money, your labor, and it's the fruits of your labor, what you've earned by producing goods and services into the economy. And now, having been productive, you exchange your compensation for the fuel and pay for the highway in the matter of course. Why wouldn't you be entitled to the use of the road? What have you done that was so wrong that you could be banished for the road, except that you get a paid permit from some organization? When particularly, if that's a crime if I do this, it's also a crime if they do this.
So you're telling me that you don't have the power of extortion. Is that what you're telling me?
That's right. Well, the thing about it is, when I take somebody's freedom, or I take the fruits of someone's labor, then I also, sort of being judged by my own law, have every right to lose my freedom and the fruits of my labor. You see that when someone wants to say, no, I want a different law, I want a law that allows me to take from you, you're also granting equal rights under the law doctrine. And now somebody has a right to take from you.
How does that pertain to the Trading with the Enemy Act?
Well, okay. if you want a right to commit a crime, you want to be able to say, "Gee, lady, that's a great house you live in," and take her house if she doesn't pay you. All right. You're talking about trading with the enemy. Well, now you become a registered voter, and you're going to do something and participate in a democratic form of government. In other words, this is no longer a republic. You're responsible. You're putting the X down here that says, I want this lady to be, I want us all together to be muscled for this many mills according to the valuation of our house, So we have hundreds of dollars for the school district and hundreds more for the police department and the library and the this and the that and whatever else that we want to embellish our existence. And in so doing, you've created a small monster here. And some people, when they fall on misfortune, will lose their homes. And they really shouldn't. There should be ways of, even if they participated in these things, of forgiving this debt and allowing people to stay in their homes. The indigent do not need to lose their homes, too, so we can also have someone live at public expense by supplying buildings and other points of habitat when it wasn't necessary.
Do you see any problems, obviously, with what's happening now? It seems like they're trying to liberate a lot of land and make people really dependent on the government, whether it be through retirement, Social Security, your welfare of the state now, whether it's dependent. And
the facts are that the whole thing about the Social Security program is that when that money is paid in to Social Security, at the time when I studied economics at the university, they were, at that time, I don't know if they still do it this way or not. It's old information. But they were giving bonds to the Social Security Administration, and these were cheap, flimsy, horribly backed, so flimsy they were non-marketable. They would not pass muster to be sold on the New York Bond Exchange or anything like this. And they were just debt instruments that were handed to Social Security in exchange for the surplus money. Never in the history of Social Security has all of the money appropriated for the purposes of Social Security ever been paid to beneficiaries. Ever. Never happened. Okay? And as far as I know, I could be wrong about that. It's been years since I've looked. But at one point when I did look, the money collected was always in excess. And the facts are that could be easily invested into real estate investment trusts, group people off, give them, title, actual, at least an equitable title, a share of these trusts and the monies they produce, and rents and mining properties, agricultural property, you name it, the way any property can yield. And the investments would be worth a fabulous amount of money. I can remember I was talking to an internal revenue agent to say I do have these problems in life. And I can remember talking to one, and I said, well, you'll be really glad to know that for 4.5 years I worked for the Greens Creek Mining Company in Juneau, Alaska. I worked there until the place shut down, and I lost my house because I couldn't make the house payments and raise 4 boys and take care of a wife on a Dairy Queen job. It wasn't there. So I lost my house, but I tried hard in the 4.5 years to pay as much of the debt as I could, and I didn't make it. But of course, during that time, in the 4.5 years I worked there, I did buy some Federalia house. I paid enough in Social Security. The company's matching half of the Social Security based on my pay, and the federal income tax in the 4.5 years I worked for that mining company would have paid off my house. So I bought some Federalia house in 4.5 years, but I have yet to have a house of my own now. I have no home that belongs truly to me, only an equitable holding as I make mortgage payments. They'll be paid off when I'm 100. But if I had that same house in Juneau, that house that I owed $120,000 on, recently sold for over $400,000. The rent on such a house would be greater than all of my Social Security put together. That's just on 4.5 years of tax payments. I started paying the federal income tax in 1966 when I went to the Bunker Hill Mining Company, and the fellow said, well, you can't have a job here if you don't have a Social Security card. And that was the beginning of the woes. I believed the man. He was a young man fresh out of high school. And what was the quality of my American history and American government education at that point? Was pretty sketchy. And but I look back at my 7th grade teacher, and what he told me was right. And it took me a while to figure all of that out after I got out of school.
You know, much of what you talk about, it kind of seems like it goes towards the discussions of the American National Trust.
And
do you know much about that you could expand on?
No, I don't know anything about that. What is the American National Trust?
It's supposed to be the original trust that set up as all Americans as the original beneficiary of everything this country does, and that has been absconded by the corporations that are the service companies that are parading as governments now. Has a lot to do with...
Like the D2
right,
bills, for example?
I believe so, and also the TDA accounts through the Federal Reserve banks, the branches.
Tennessee Valley Authority, all of that.
Yeah.
What you look at in those things when you see the big land grab, as it relates to the Federal Reserve, Jimmy Carter, okay, he's president, and the Federal Reserve stops loaning money to the United States government. The window has gone closed. Bank interest rates, prime rate went to 16, 17%, something like that, and the economy was in a very fast tailspin. And oh yes, just pass these D2 land bills, and we'll tie up land in Alaska and all the western states and anywhere else we can create federal land out of what was then called public land. This was land open for claiming, land that could be claimed by anyone. You could start a mine, a farm, and trees, whatever you wanted to do to develop and make the land produce. But there was no infrastructure. There's no roads back there, no power, no this, no that. And commodities are relatively inexpensive. And so it's very hard to develop land when you know you're not going to make much money. And so it's just sat there for a long time. So the government grabbed huge amounts and created national monuments and national wildlife refuges and wetlands and all kinds of different things, I'm sure, poured out of this philosophy of the land grab. And suddenly, the Federal Reserve found the United States of America creditworthy today. People are aghast at a $20 trillion debt. Actually, the United States is good for it. If you think about it, there's enough, if I just counted the coal, and we look back in the late 1970s, Carter's president, Reagan was elected in 80, right? Is that right? I think it is. Okay, and we look at the late 70s, Carter's president, and we see this, there was enough just in coal, in the land that was grabbed there, to operate the United States of America's energy needs for the next 1,000 years at 1970s levels. Now we look at how much shale oil is in the claims that stretch southward through the Dakotas, sweep eastward, and up into New York. Shale oil, probably another 1,000 years worth. There's enough oil for the United States to run itself for 2,000 years in oil and coal alone, without discovering any nuclear or other methods of producing energy. No hydroelectric, no gas, we're not talking about any of that, and there's more, way more besides the 2,000 years I just talked about. But of course, I didn't get that from a politician. I got that from a geology book. Make sense? Are you there?
Yeah, sorry, I just had you on mute. I couldn't get to it quick enough. Yes, absolutely. I mean, we got so much locked up in reserves. There's been some really good stories kind of coming out about some upcoming stories that will be coming out, kind of the truth behind the truth about, I think it was in 1913 and 1914 when the Grand Canyon was locked up. And when I say locked up, I mean tighter than a drum, because they have found one of the greatest hoards of gold ever discovered in the world in the Grand Canyon. And it just happened to sit at the base of what actually used to be pyramids. That's why most of the Grand Canyon you can't go to. And there are many of the sections named after the pharaohs and whatnot, where there was some other archaeology done and found tombs, sarcophaguses that matched exactly to the time of the pharaohs, the same styling, as well as statues of Buddha and things. A lot of these things are coming out, but these are true treasures that we have locked up in America, and exactly describe what you're saying. We have an untold bounty of wealth around us.
Oh, you look at some of the poorest people on earth. They live in Russia. Russia has its own Alaska, for example. It's called Siberia, and it's bigger than the entire United States. And you've seen these people in abject poverty. You've seen these people cruelly beaten, imprisoned, work camps, 40 million people dead under Joseph Stalin alone. That's how horrible this thing is. And we have elements of that government in this government, and they don't belong with us.
Oh, there's no doubt. I mean, after World War II, Operation Paperclip that had brought all the Nazis here,
Sure.
Ones that should have swung, because during the Nuremberg trials, they ended up starting places like NASA here and helping found the secret services and things. And we've got Nazis in our past. And, well, I think we got Nazis in the government now.
The Soviet Union has basically gone fascist. We look at the KGB. We look at Vladimir Putin. He's quite a character. He actually stole the country's oil industry just because he was so big with the KGB. He could muscle anybody he wanted in the country. It looks to me like he did. That's what he did. He just basically stole the oil company. The government still produces the oil. They sell it to him under contract for the cost of the production, and then he takes it to market and clears and I think their production costs are maybe, I'm going to guess and say $3 to $6 a barrel, and the rest of the money is his. He takes it to market for the profits on the commodity exchanges.
Oh, absolutely. When he came into power, the oligarchs that came about and were created during that period are unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable, and they're still plaguing us today.
The steel industry fell into certain hands. They divided up the economy.
Yes, absolutely they have. And Rosneft, and people still think of these as different countries. People really need to start thinking about these governments not as governments, because they really aren't. They're just corporations that parade as government.
Is basically what they are. They're financial interests.
Their financial interest, exactly. But, and they're all in bed with each other, like you were talking about Rosneft, the oil company of Russia. Rex Tillerson just made big deals with them. So did Joe Biden's son, I think was it Beau Biden maybe? Just got a big equitable deal through them worth billions. John Kerry, I want to say, he had the family member that, these are just big troughs that they feed off the benefits of the people that are
people who actually work and are enslaved working for these people and actually producing the oil.
Absolutely.
One of the things I liked about, if you look at the Ludlow, Colorado incident, are you familiar?
I actually am. I've got a friend that's writing a book on it. He's a miner from there.
Okay, that's wonderful. Well, you look at that strike, and we see that, the Rockefeller ownership Oh, I think they went to the nearest county seat and got the sheriff's deputies and everybody all up in arms. They deputized everybody in town. And these are nothing but a bunch of communists and all this other stuff, and accused them of everything. And they ran roughshod over their camp that they'd set up on public land. It was available for claiming, really. They massacred these people. They set the tents on fire, killed women and children and everybody else over this strike. Now, all these men were doing was they wanted a fair treatment. They wanted to be paid in real money, not company script. They wanted to be free to earn a decent living. They know the price of coal, but they had to buy some. And they see what they got paid and how much money they produced, and they just screaming bloody murder. No, you have to pay us, and we want our gold coin. We don't want your company script. It's only good at the company store, et cetera. And you look at this idea of withholding what they had to sell, their labor, and we don't think that the oil producing don't withhold their oil for higher prices. They're doing the same thing that the oil companies are doing. But if labor does it, it's a crime. They need to be shot down by deputies and the rest. And if the business world does it, they need to be pandered to by the politicians for a campaign contribution or some such thing.
Oh, you're exactly right, and I've did some grokking on this in the past, and totally equated the Ludlow massacre. Well, I like to think of the old song when I think about that is I sold my soul to the company store by, Tennessee Ernie Ford.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's it's the same exact thing we have going on in every town, every community across the entire state, probably the entire globe, really. These are all company stores. And the like FNSB here where I am, Fairbanks North Star Borough, it's not even a county. And these are just company stores. These are for-profit corporations that do business with other corporations. That's why they outsource a lot. They don't hire people from the localities. They like to hire mercenaries that don't know the areas. But they enslave you through the road taxes, through the local taxation, property taxes. That's the company store.
Well, in a way, it is. Of course, I think the biggest perpetrator in the whole thing is the federal income tax and Social Security system. That's the biggest pig that I've seen. I've compared it to a lot of things. I've compared it to ordinary crime. But if I were to compare it, the tax against wages as an enslavement, well, let's take a look and let's just talk about that and see how it compares. Let's suppose I own a slave. All right. I buy somebody, as ridiculous as that sounds, that has happened in the world, in our world too. Well, I want to make some money, and I'm a relatively poor man. I don't own any fine mines and farms and factories and grand hotels and shipping companies wherein to work my slave. I could hire him out somewhere. I could let him find his own job. I'm not cranky about that. He's got something he wants to do. But I would say to whomever worked my property, my slave, work my property in a reasonable and safe fashion. Make sure he wears all appropriate safety gear, works in a clean, safe work environment, and by the way, send me, say, 20% of his salary. That would be my right as the owner of said man or woman. All right. What's the difference between the master-slave relationship in my example and the federal government employee relationship? And now we're getting over into the amendments. We're violating the 13th Amendment.
Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. And that's just a brilliant visual.
Yeah, well, I just, it's like a lot of things that people they're seeing this with their own eyes, and they don't give it the thought that is even the most ordinary thought, because I think it's just a little disquieting. It's a little frightening. And yet, these things are going to have to be faced by all people in this country if you're going to have any sense of decency. If you wanted to read another excellent read, and there's not an American voice in the crowd, the Black Book of Communism is an excellent read. It's the history of communist revolutions and the mass murders that took place in so many countries that fell to communism. The Idi Amins, the Pol Pots, the Patrice Lumumbas, and the list goes on. You know, I mean, Pol Pot, the killing fields in Cambodia. My God. The only reason that, you know, I think the biggest murder count was, I think, in Mao Zedong's reign of terror, he probably was responsible for the murder of over 100 million of his own people. The insanity of total government, of enslaving a population, of disarming a population. We're blessed with some very, very decent history here. And I think, bringing the common law of England back is a very good idea. It limits the power of government. And to get a true republic where only the rights of the people can be granted to the government. And the right to extort, there's no right at all. You know, if you demand somebody pay you for earning a living, you're pretty well done. And I notice some people say, well, I don't feel quite as enslaved as I might. And I say, well, the thing of it is that you're in favor of agreement with slavery. It's just not absolute, total in every facet of your life. But the thing about it is, it's becoming that. It's increasing all the time. I think just the federal tax take is probably a quarter of the year's pay in most cases.
From your perspective, what are some of the better ways that you've seen from disconnecting from these corporations?
Well, a lot of it is first of all, if you wanted to, they're going to have to start looking for conflicts of interest. All right? And make it less profitable for a corporation to want to take over the world. Okay? It's like a large corporation. We look at our 95% owned by an elite 1 to 2% of our people. All right? There are too many conflicts of interest there. Okay, one would be, for example, we look at this great concern throughout the public now over toxins in our foods. Gee, we look at nitrates and nitrites and nitrosamines in prepackaged meats, and now they're finding that these are magnificent in force in forming beta amyloid plaques, otherwise Alzheimer's disease. And it happens in mice, it happens in rats, it happens in humans. If they eat this stuff, they form beta amyloid plaques and become very confused. Okay, we look at this, and it's in the foods in small amounts. And over a lifetime of people being exposed to this, many people, I think that Alzheimer's was at least, at one point, it was 1 in 7 people die of Alzheimer's disease. I think it's up to maybe 1 in 6, maybe 1 in 5 by now. I'm not sure. I'd have to look it up. But you can check it out. It's high, very high death rate. Okay. Then you see a conflict of interest in having those who own the food supply also own the medical supply. You know, the food supply produces heart disease, cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's, this and that. The medical community collects in a big way from the elderly in this country. And sometimes it will take huge amounts of money. It will cost the price of their homes, their small businesses, their investment portfolios in order to survive. And to let that fall into the hands of that same elite who poisoned them in the first place. What do you think? You
know, this kind of sounds, to a lot of people, I'd like to use the term Orwellian.
Well, the thing about it is, we have what I'm presenting here. I'm not saying they're guilty of this. It just looks that way. What we're having is we have enough data, and so we see they have the motive, the ability, and the opportunity to do this kind of thing. we see that there is a correlation between all of these food toxins and these diseases. And yet there are no, once you have the motive, the ability, and the opportunity, that's a pretty good definition for the word suspect. Another good definition for the word suspect is someone of whom you should be suspicious and whom should be the target of your investigation. But there is no investigation. Or if it is, it's lip service only.
I agree. It seems a lot of times they distract with the whole forest through, oh, look at this tree. You better tell us the DNA of this tree, how it was formed, the growth cycle of this tree. You've got to know it explicitly before you can move on to the next tree and the next tree, and then maybe one day you can tell us how the forest appears. But I think we've been bogged down in that through the divisions of the education
the particulars are numerous, but the principles that we espouse, generally they have a ring of truth to.
Absolutely. What you were saying just a second ago, too, it brings to mind the Zika virus and the fact that you can pull up the Zika virus and see that it's owned by the Rockefeller family. And I think these are direct correlations that we can make to close these families down for good by whether it be class action lawsuits or whether people just want to go after them.
Well, the thing of it is, you have this grave responsibility here if this was deliberately released as a test for some kind of germ warfare and dumped on some unsuspecting people. Seem to have broken out in Africa or someplace. And now we have it worldwide. The sad fact of the matter is that even the vast fortunes of the Rockefellers couldn't put a dent in redeeming these lives. We were looking at people who are going to be permanently, lifelong disabled people. And the shock that someone would do this deliberately just because they've decided the world is overpopulated or we need to destroy the average IQ. Let's destroy the brains of babies.
Oh, you're right. It's hard for people to fathom that there are actually people out there that don't have empathy. Whether it be through genetics or line breeding or blood or whatever. But a lot of these people are actually eugenicists. This is proven fact. Bill Gates,
there was a lady
his family's a big
eugenicist. There was a lady who wrote another interesting book, and I think that as long as we're talking about psychopathy and things, there was one, The Sociopath Next Door. I forget the lady's name, but it's an easy, small paperback. Anybody can buy one. And I'd recommend getting a hard copy of one called Snakes in Suits. That one was quite a read. And the two together will make an excellent impression on anyone who's interested in the sociopathic/psychopathic personality. And
it would be kind of interesting if anybody's got any special information on as far as the Stockholm Syndrome and the way people through fear tactics and whatnot, become sympathizers to their captors. This is a very well-known thing, but people, I think, nowadays, the people I know, the people I see and tangibly know, they all suffer, and as well as I did and probably most other people, from a form of Stockholm Syndrome, of cowering to this government that's this service corporation that claims to be the government and is physically, mentally causing harm to everyone.
Well, I'm kind of against this massive spirit of revenge. I really don't think that that's totally appropriate, but I do think that some penalties should be imposed. But as far as this absolute bloodthirst, even against the bloodthirsty. I don't see that that's fruitful. There's a famous man who told us, judge not, to forgive, to bless those who would spitefully use you, to forgive and you will be forgiven, to judge not lest you be judged, to do these things. Well, I think that we can stop the crime without becoming this horrific spirit of revenge in ourselves.
Exactly.
I don't think
we don't have to become them in the process.
No. What we have to do is start electing honest people. We've had the decline into a sort of a communist world, and of course this is all power to the top type of thinking. And we're seeing this consistently, and the public debt is mounting horribly, and the freedom of people to actually go out on the land and live and prosper and by their own hands is becoming more and more restricted. In fact, you have to pay this monstrosity in order to just have a simple home, whether you did business out of there or not. And you see this thing happening, but I think it's happening because the average American approves. You see this, we want this, or we wouldn't reelect it year after year. We see what the Democrats did in 1913. Woodrow Wilson, a great leader of the Democratic Party. We got the income tax and the Federal Reserve Act, placing all power in the hands of an elite in this country over money. Whereas before, anybody who wanted to start a bank could. You could take on deposits, you could loan money and take on large projects in the local area and sell bonds and all this stuff. And the banks would help manage it. And it wouldn't be anybody could start a bank. Anybody. Just go into business and declare yourself a bank and follow the rules. There's law governing what you do. And it was pretty good back in the day. And we had a gold dollar, a silver dollar. We were in good shape. And you look at anybody could start mining, whether it was a pan or in a creek. And these were the original issues of money. Anybody who had some gold, and I don't care if you were a large mining company, a small pan in a creek, a scrap metal dealer, if you had some gold, you could take it to the mint and have it struck into coins and be the primary issuer of money. You didn't need the Federal Reserve to do it. Or the United States government, the Denver Mint, the San Francisco Mint, the Philadelphia Mint, the New Orleans Mint, the Carson City Mint, all these different places where money was struck. Wherever there was some silver, they usually started a mint. And people brought the silver.
Kind of brings up an interesting point of something that's been happening in the federal government recently, and this year. We reported on it in the newspaper, and we were some of the first, I think. House Resolution 5404 about going back to the gold standard and auditing the Federal Reserve Bank. Pretty interesting.
That's a very important thing.
I agree. And supposedly, approximately 3 months ago, I heard it was signed into law in a private little session in the White House. But that's hearsay. I don't want to say anything. I don't want to say it's the truth. But some good sources sometimes. So yeah, and with the back and forth that you're seeing between the actors in the federal government and the Federal Reserve Bank and IMF right now, it seems to lead a lot of credence to that. I know they're also trying to get into I think they're trying to get this cryptocurrency out is the biggest thing, and then as well as the metals.
Well, I think if you had a lot of the cryptocurrency, which is just as fiat as anything else, the only benefit it has is that it's inherently limited as to how much there can be. And so you have this, as the demand for these currencies go up, and the limit as to how many of them can be out there or something like that might be necessary. But it could also suffer its own inflation just by having thousands of different companies, which for our computer age is that hard to keep track.
Exactly. It can be the exact same thing that we have now with the Federal Reserve and fractional reserve banking. you can divide and divide and divide everything until it's so fractional, there's nothing there really, and they just keep selling the same thing over and over.
Well, that's it. It's when you want some substance, you want fuels, you want food, you want automobiles, you want something of substance, you're going to buy it. And should it be so impossible to give substance for that? I look at how much money that I have made mining companies. I've gone in and made differences just tweaking a few knobs of millions of dollars for every year, and that was when gold was 200 and change. And I've turned the knobs and tweaked the dials a little bit and fussed and bothered and gave it a great deal of professional ethics when I processed metals. And the profits went straight up. And we ran less equipment and produced more gold. They liked it. Now, of course, I never made any more than $14 an hour, but I changed their income just in gold by $250,000 a month. There was a huge rise in the amount of gold actually salvaged. They were losing 21% of the gold to the tailings pond, and a comparable amount of the copper and silver as well. But just the gold made them $250,000 a month. And even at the time that I was there, the copper in the ore was enough to pay all the bills. It paid all the fuels, all the labor, all the gold. It was just gravy over the top. All of the equipment was bought with copper. The silver and gold were extra. The company went broke.
Interesting how that happens sometimes.
Yeah, it was actually, I actually think I was witnessing the prototype of the great bankruptcy of 2008 where everybody was on the bailout. But I saw this little company, and it looked to me, and I don't know if it really went down this way or if I'm just being speculative there, but it seemed like what I saw was these people wanted to make some quick money, the board of directors, and they razzle-dazzled the banks with their handsomely profitable small mine, and they were going to, take over other mining properties and yada yada, without naming where and when. But of course, none of that came to pass. That they borrowed multiple millions of dollars against the general obligations of the company, and of course, not one of their projects took off. They siphoned off the money to themselves, golden parachute plans, the rest. Bailed on the company, wrote a $30 share of capital stock down to about 3 cents, something like that, and ran off with the money, and left it bankrupt. And the stakeholders, the people who worked for the mine, the people who, it was just scandalous what was done. But it was, later on I saw, that it was actually the prototype for the archetypical bankruptcy of General Motors, Chrysler, and AIG, and, Merrill Lynch, and AIG, I said them, but all these people, it's insane, Lehman Brothers, Goldman Sachs, they all work that way, borrowed huge amounts of money, killed the company, and ran to the printing press for more.
It's a debt-driven world, right?
Well, it is, But
we've allowed the
teams at the top are doing pretty well.
Debt flows up, and that's kind of the whole discussion earlier. It's really not hard to discern a direct correlation between these very few people that run all these corporations and realizing runaway corporations is our very problem, corporate personhood.
Oh, I look at that and we see it in the theft. What was it? It was the AARP people had an article on Medicare a few months back talking about hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. I don't remember the figures, but they were huge, of money that was falsely billed to Medicare. And then these billing companies fold up close up shop and disappear. They're out of business, bankrupt, and gone before they can even think to catch them. This is quite an article. Yeah, the business fraud these days is absolutely rife in this country.
It absolutely is. Hey, I hate to kind of stop it for a second, but we've got like an hour and 40-something minutes in. I was hoping we could break and see if we got some questions. And
well, I'm sure that there would be some people that would like to comment or say, a little more. And there's so much that can be said on this and so much that can be discussed. And I did want to keep it rather simple. I'm kind of confining let's have anybody that wants to have some questions confine it to the subject of where in the Constitution does it say, where does it say, what does it say, how, and if they have any questions, they didn't get the notes down, we can review some of those questions.
Perfect. Anybody that has questions? Anybody that has questions, if you hit *6 to unmute or your mute button, please announce yourself and ask your question.
I have some questions. This is Maria.
Hi, Maria.
Hey, Jim. I was just wondering, I was watching the voting frenzy yesterday. And, sorry?
I didn't even look.
That's a good policy. I got into Facebook.
I don't need to be any sicker.
Yeah, I got into Facebook, and unfortunately, I got, there was a frenzy there, and so it came up in my mind, and I kind of feel like this is probably true. When you register to vote, do you agree to the outcome of a Democratic election? Is that a contract that you're creating there?
Well, I kind of think it is, basically. You're looking at, you want to be the person that is, particularly in voting, you get these referenda on the ballots of how you're going to finance the schools or finance the police or finance the local, business here at hand, whatever it is, how you're going to pay the street lights, electric bill, whatever. And you implicitly say that you're going to pledge your property, your home, as collateral for public debt, and there'll be a mill rate, and yada, yada. Okay. As a registered voter. There are lots of other ways to sign up, be a U.S. citizen. Okay, and I think a lot of them have heard this issue. If you look at the Social Security regulations at 404.1004, that's 20 Code of Federal Regulations covering Social Security, you'll find out under the definition for U.S. citizen that that's a person who is from the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, Guam, American Samoa, the Virgin Islands, and the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, end of the list. In January of 1959, Alaska was removed from that list when it became the 49th state. In August of 1959, Hawaii was removed from that list when you saw Hawaii become the 50th state. That was August, I think, 21, January 3 and August 21. Anyway, the respective years of 1959 for Alaska and Hawaii. But anyway, the trick is that you see this happening, and when you call yourself a United States citizen, you're a citizen of Puerto Rico, or you will volunteer to that status as a citizen not covered by the Bill of Rights. The preamble to the Constitution, "We the people of the United States," is followed by another preamble before the Bill of Rights. Reads, "A number of the states having at the time of their adopting the Constitution reserved the right to rescind their signatures unless further declaratory clauses be added," et cetera, et cetera. Okay, you just look in your copy of the Constitution and look for the preamble to the Bill of Rights, not the Constitution. And you'll find it, and sometimes you find copies of the Constitution that are not printing that. You see that missing from many publications of the U.S. Constitution. Well, the thing being that is if you're not a citizen of one of the 50 states of the Union, then you're not covered by the Bill of Rights. Okay? And you waive that when you say you're a U.S. citizen. So you can be enslaved. You said so. You're the one, you volunteered to be a territorial citizen and not a citizen of one of the 50 states.
And the United States.
You're an enemy of the Republic. When you say I'm a United States citizen, you're saying I don't want my rights under the Bill of Rights. And that surprises most people because they didn't intend that. You go to an ordinary law dictionary, a layperson's ordinary Webster's law dictionary, or not even a law dictionary, just a dictionary, and you look up the words United States, it has three possible definitions. One, it could mean the 50 states. Or two, it could mean the territories only. Or three, it could mean just generally pertinent to the United States of America as opposed to France or Germany or England or Indonesia or Taiwan or wherever. And most people take that third definition to be what they meant. In fact, it isn't. Social Security Regs 20 Code of Federal Regulations 4041004. Look there. Don't take my word for it. Look it up.
And one of the definitions of the United States is territories, the territories and the District of Columbia, right? So when you're saying
I've
the
seen
United
that
States,
I have. That wasn't. I don't think that was in the regular dictionary that I looked at the time. But yeah, I think I have seen that in places before. But the District of Columbia, it says one side. It has a Maryland side and a Virginia side. And I think even though they've donated the land for this not to exceed 10 miles square, I think Washington, the District of Columbia, was intended to contain the city of Washington. It might have had other cities, but Washington took the entire thing, and that way you didn't have a duplicity of government. What dictated the district was also the city. It's like the city and borough of Kodiak or the city and borough of Juneau. Like that.
and I'll let somebody else ask some questions, but if there aren't any others, I would like to come back to Trading with the Enemies Act in a minute or two.
Okay. Well, it's great. When does the show end? How much time do we have left?
We normally try to get to 2 hours, but this is our second show.
Chris, did you say 2 hours? So it ends at 7?
I think it's at 7, but I imagine if we wanted to run a little past that, I don't know what the rules are on the recording.
I have no idea. It was just scheduled for 2 hours even. So.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's plenty of time, and I think if anybody listens to our recording or listens to the show tonight, and I hope they do, and I hope they will really take the time to get hold of at least a copy of the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the Alaska Statehood Act. You can Google all of these up. They're all there. Communist Manifesto to see just where such policies are actually coming from, and the things like this. I think that they're going to have to, look at some of these violations and these indiscriminate, just the devil may care but I don't attitude toward this Constitution, the Declaration, and the rest. And doing anything to redefine the citizenry, redefine anything you can do to get people to accidentally, I would say, basically construct an argument that you're not a citizen entitled to the rights and benefits under the Declaration of the Constitution, etc.
One thing I would like to add as well for people's understanding that these people, these entities, I should say, operate under UCC law, which is commercial code, which is statutory law, which is criminal law, which is on and on. They've got lots of different names. They operate under legalese. They deal with barristers and things.
Well, the thing about it is, if we go back to that basic document that says all rights are inherent in the people, or that all men are created equal, it didn't mean the same height, weight, running speed, lifespan, IQ, yada, yada, and men equal before the law. And we look at that equality before the law, and we look at these alleged, there must be titles of nobility for these people to commit these crimes. And they are crimes if you do it, probably crimes if they do it, equality before the law. Okay, and we look at these things basically. You can look at the U.S. citizens. Oh, does that mean that the citizens of the 50 states have the right to go to Puerto Rico and say, gee, lady, that's a nice house, gee, mister, that's a nice paycheck. I don't like it how you're on your public highway with that, and they start extorting money out of Puerto Ricans. Or would there be some U.S. Marshal kind of object to that? So you don't have those rights anyway. Morally, you shouldn't have the right to attack people for their pay, their homes, their cars, other transport, whatever it may be, airplanes, boats, whatever. It's ridiculous.
And they do it under the color of law.
Right. They call it law, but in fact it's a violation of the most basic laws, the whole purpose of the law. They're setting down the rules for the United States of America in the Declaration of Independence. They hold these truths and be equality before the law. They are endowed with certain unalienable rights. So natural, so occurring. You're a physical being in a physical world. Does it make sense? You need a place to be. Yeah, it kind of is. Logical, obvious.
Simple English language should be more than sufficient to understand what's going on in this world. People don't need to understand legalese, Chinese, Japanese. It's
nice if you do, but if you don't have it, you don't have it. I don't speak much Japanese. Watashi wa Amerikanin desu.
There you go. There.
In Japanese. Anyway.
Now, one other thing too is now understanding that these entities operate under the law like this. Remember, you have a right, even under their law, that you can cancel these contracts that you've been either
I think every
involved
contract would have an out. Yeah, if they become old and they become decrepit, they become no longer applicable to reality after years. Tiresome.
Corpses are for the dead.
Well, you're either going to get rid of them or you're going to become a corpse yourself in some concentration camp or something. If you look at history, the Russians or the Chinese or the tin pot dictatorships that have sprung up around the world and murdered millions. And like I said, even like I said, the owners of the food supply, are they spreading this sincerely as a result of a sincere desire to reduce spoilage, or are they really trying to kill you? The release of the Zika virus, is somebody playing and it got just a little bigger than they thought, or do they not care that it got so large? Have all these retarded children to take care of, and there will be a drain on the economy, as well as a very sad life compared to what it might have been a very productive and joyful life.
Well, I would like to point out actually a declaration of war that was made against us. And it happened in 1954, and it was called Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars.
Oh, yeah.
Are you familiar with it?
Yeah. Bill Cooper.
William Cooper covered it well.
What was it?
The Hold the Pale Horse.
Behold the Pale Horse. That was the one. Yeah, I remember.
That's kind of a must-read.
Copies of that, one so I can read from it, one for someone to follow along. We trade off reading to each other. It's a riot to read. I love it. Good book.
It's great. He's a brilliant man, and definitely my hats
well,
off
he
to him.
had to be in order to be chosen by naval intelligence in the first place. Yes, he was very bright, though.
Absolutely.
Valdemar Valerian, ever heard of him?
I haven't. I don't believe.
It's a pen name, but the man was Air Force intelligence, and he went and he wrote a whole series of books, 2 or 3 of them, called The Matrix. Great read. We're talking about your Zika virus. Well, when they first found new ways, one of the big virals that they do a lot of experimenting with the polio virus. And when they found new ways to make polio virus, of course, it made the paper because it's important for viral research. It's been a rather good one for viral research.
Of course.
And
speaking of polio.
And then, of course, then he'll have another little newspaper clipping in one of his articles on the polio virus that right after this discovery of raising new polio virus, there was a little outbreak of polio in an African village someplace just to make sure that it actually still works after they had the new stuff, I guess, is the implication. But there was just, right after the development of growing the polio virus, there was a quick little outbreak of polio in an African village someplace.
Well, we have an outbreak of polio right now in the United States. The doctors are so ignorant. They're trained in these schools just as well. They can't identify polio now that it's right in front of their face because it's had its name changed. Now they're calling this CFN or whatever this is, where people are losing the loss of their limbs and everything. It's polio, and by any other name. And this is starting to happen again, these cases, and there's a lot of confirmed cases in the U.S. right now, and probably a better portion of the states, from my understanding.
Good grief. I didn't realize.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's so many things that, let's talk about autism for 1 second. I mean, autism, it used to be
I have a great kid as a little brother and big brothers and sisters who's autistic. And he's a great guy. I like him.
Mm-hmm. Right. But this disease is plaguing 1 in 500 children now. In the last 30 years, it's gone up over 500,000%. And it kind of follows the trend of when chemtrails started being introduced with the aluminums and things, and some of the toxins in the food as well. It's hard to nail it down to one thing.
At the beginning when I first just signed on and was listening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that is an important issue. We see a lot of this, the toxicity of the environment. A lot of it, too, You look at like bisphenols coming out of plastics and into our food and water. And the effect, a lot of these chemicals that are released, even spilled in places, chemical plants and plastics manufacturing and such like that.
It's sure a lot of them to be considered accidental. It's beyond belief. I mean, like here in Fairbanks, we've got the well contamination is just, people are discovering more and more.
Homes that they were using during fire training years and years ago.
Yes. Oh, yeah. It's still, or we're still using. And I want to put the name out there of a company that does this. DuPont Corporation. They're the ones that make this toxin that's coming into all of our areas. Not just that, they were also behind the scandal with the refrigerant going up and destroying the ozone back in the early 80s. R22.
It was basically, fluorocarbons.
It was such a scam because you can take a balloon and you can take a bottle of that refrigerant and you can fill it and it drops to the ground. So how does that get 100 miles up in the air and destroy our ozone? But they had the answer right on the shelf, ready to go. We've allowed these corporations to come in and just to destroy our communities, whether we know it or not. And People don't always know when they're bad actors. If they're just showing up and taking a paycheck and they don't question what they do, they type a number, send it down the line to some other busybody at another computer that just sends them the number. This awareness, the whole reason we're doing this show, the whole reason it's important for you to give your message like you deliver it.
I hope
Thank
that,
you.
like I said, it isn't my message. This was a message from Madison, from Jefferson, from people who wrote this stuff down years and years ago. I just want you to know where to find it, where to actually look at it.
But Jim, I gotta say, you know what? It's your voice. It's your voice that just remanifested this.
Well, yeah.
It's your voice that's helping carry that.
I didn't think this up. I just know a great idea when I see one.
That's right.
Okay.
And thank you for being very plain-spoken.
Well, I hope that it does some honest-to-God good. I hope we make people curious. I hope they look out. You go to an American history class, and it's the most boring thing you'd ever think. You'll go to an American government class, and it's the most lackluster presentation you'd ever think. The truth of the matter is we have an extremely colorful country. Rogues and villains and whatnot, as well as some of the great human beings of the earth have participated in its creation. And it's a colorful and beautiful history. And to know a little more about it doesn't hurt anyone. And maybe you can't learn all about it. You're a busy man. You have a living to make. You have problems to deal with. All of us do. But the truth is that we have a magnificent country. And its colorful history is very informative, very entertaining. It's a rich history, one of the richest on the planet. And it's time people were aware of this, of the great things that our past freedoms brought us, and to get back, to stop becoming this tin pot dictatorship that it's turning into. These are cheap substitutes for what we had. Flimsy, cheap, and ephemeral. They'll be struck and they'll be washed away. All they're going to do is ultimately destroy themselves. And sooner or later, they're going to have to stand up for honesty and decency.
Absolutely.
And stop the electing organized crime to run our country.
Jim, I wanted to say thank you for coming on too. I hope you'll come back, and as we continue to build on some of these topics as we go.
Yeah, I'll probably sign off now. I think that's a good idea. I've actually taken up most of the show, and I really only wanted to take up about 15, 20 minutes with the basics.
Well, and I wanted
get
to
off
put
and let
down.
somebody else talk about it. There's more issues than just the basics, but I want somebody to be able to grasp the basics. The idea that once they know what a title of nobility is and understand it and read about it and realize that this means a separate law for the people up there, they're allowed to commit crimes, or at least what would be crimes if others did it. And to understand that this taking exception to the general law is a tremendous crime. It's colossal in its cost. It's just abominable. And it needs to be corrected. And it will be. But the taller they stand, the harder they fall. We don't need to have it stand any taller. It's going to be hard enough as it is. Anyhow, you have a great night. I'm going to go ahead and sign off and go on about some of my other goings-ons here.
All right. Thanks
Much
again.
love.
Okay, I'll be in touch to see if anybody contacted you and called. So, Chris, expect a phone call, Maria, too.
Okay. That sounds great.
Thank you, Jim.
You're welcome.
And Chris, I had planned to put links to, we filmed Mr. Jim about a year or so ago at the library here at North Pole, and I was going to put the links in there. Looks like Gus actually put them up in the chat earlier. It's got some of the basics that Jim covered tonight, but we filmed him in a quiet spot. So we'll get those out in addition to them being posted in the chat for people if they want to go back over some of the basics.
Absolutely. You never know how far the spark of a teacher may carry. Maybe 20 years from now somebody will hear that. And
are you still on the call?
Okay. Can you hear me?
I'm sorry? Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Maybe 20 years from now somebody will look back and maybe see this and hear this and glean something that may change the world, All we can do is keep on keeping on. And, I got to say thank you to Gus Breton over there at Redress for Dummies. Much love, brother. I recognize, as well I'm sure Maria and everybody else, we recognize the work you put in, the love you give, and what you share with your community, and it's valued, brother. I can't say thank you enough. Maria, the same. I call you Saint Maria, right? You are. And
I'm not going for that one. No.
You may not accept it, but I got to tell you from the community that don't even know how much you mean to them yet. Thank you.
I appreciate that very much. I happen to leave that religion with all the Santa Marias.
Right.
I wanted to mention what I mentioned to you earlier on the phone, that we've got a bunch of ideas. This is just the beginning with Mr. Jim, and we've got a whole lot more of exploring to do on future shows, but I really want to hear from people on Gus's program or whoever's tuned in about what it is that they want to hear about that will help them practically in their life. And so they can email me at rensel@reagan.com. And most people on the call probably have my email, but it's RENSEL@REAGAN.com. And I'll start putting that up on the chat as we do these shows. But we'd like to hear from everybody what they want to hear about.
Absolutely, and the same. We also are the co-companion to the print newspaper that we produce here in Fairbanks, Alaska, called Free the People AK. You can see us at freethepeopleak.com. It's just a few of us getting this thing rolling, and we've been in production for almost 2 years now, still putting out a newspaper, an actual physical, non-changeable, non-memory holdable print, take it to the outhouse with your newspaper. And I got to say, we're proud of that because it reaches out to villages, it reaches out to other states. It's amazing where this thing is. I mean, we just recently hit number 10 in the state for circulation. Not bad for a newspaper that it costs us money out of our pocket every month to make sure we get it to our community, I got to say much gratitude and much love to all the people that do help out. In fact, the partner in the newspaper, if she's listening right now, is in Salt Lake. She won an award for the paper through the university where she's working on her studies to better serve herself and the community through journalism. So much love to everybody, and you can get to us through a number of places, so please don't be afraid. We hope to see you all back next week. Please bring your questions. If you have anything that you care to share, if you have anything that you've used and learned in the common law and how to get out from under the Babylonian Mammon money system that has been transgressing us, please share. We're all your kin. Much love and gratitude, everybody. Have a wonderful evening.
Have a wonderful evening. I just wanted to add real quick, too, we're hoping to be able to live stream on YouTube with this show. So hopefully we'll have that up by next week. If not, we'll we'll let you know when the learning curve meets reality here, and we'll do it then.
Absolutely. Thank
All
you very
right.
much, Maria. Have a wonderful evening.
Good night.
Good night, all.
Good night.